You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 142. These are my top 5 do's and don'ts and takeaways, observations, and insights from marking over 400 pages of real student responses for the most recent external exams. And this episode is going to share with you the highlights that I feel every student and their parent needs to know. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hey VIPs, I hope you are well. I hope you're enjoying the wind down towards the end of the year, although I know for a lot of you it's more of a wind up because there are so many different events and so many things happening. But I hope that you are enjoying the lead up to Christmas and the summer holidays and everything that comes with that. I today want to share with you some of the highlights, in fact, probably all of the highlights, but just not every single minute of a recent webinar that I ran, sharing with parents and students all of the things that were just building up in my brain as I have just marked over 400 pages of real student responses, their actual external exams for an external exam board for 2025. Now, I, of course, cannot share at this stage any of the content of the exam paper or the mark scheme or what students were writing because none of that stuff has actually been released yet by this exam board. I was marking for the QCIA, but I can absolutely be sharing the general concepts, observations, and really important, I'll just call them do's and don'ts of things that I saw students doing that were fantastic and I want more students to do, things that they were doing that absolutely I would not be encouraging any student to do, and everything in between. So what I have done so that none of these gold nuggets are lost is edit together the highlights of that seminar, and in particular focusing on the actionable, strategic, very precise advice and pointers and tips that I want to give to you and your teen. So I hope you find it really helpful and enjoy. Because what I want to share with you today is basically the what to do and what not to do. Do this, definitely don't do this in exams. But specifically, because this is the part I think that is missing so often, is I want students to understand, and I want you as the parents to understand how and why that is. Because if we don't understand the how and the why, we're just learning things parrot fashion. This is why I think so often things are not done a great enough job of reflecting and going over past paper questions or even practice questions that students do. And I believe it's because, number one, there's not enough of the how and the why behind it. It's just like, this got this mark, this didn't get this mark. And so either students got a great mark and they're like, phew, brilliant, great, what's next? Or if they don't get such a great mark, they're like, oh gosh, well, let's just hope we never get that again. And also like, thank goodness I'm never going to get that exact question again. And this is the issue. You're never going to get the same question again. So even if you end up perfecting what you should or shouldn't have done for that particular question, how's it going to help you when you're not going to get the same question again? They're not going to ask that exact same question next year. So I always want to help students understand, how are we supposed to be tackling this? How do we break this down? How do we work that out? Or why did this get a mark? Why didn't it get a mark? What's going on behind the scenes? Okay, that's what I want to share with you. So very much the focus is on the how and the why. And the reason that I'm doing this is because this is what I see so often, okay? That when students are doing assignments, inquiry reports, essentially coursework, hand-ins, assessments, all of the things, essays, the hardworking, the smart, the committed students are doing great. And it's the exams
that bring down and drag down their mark. This is what I see over and over and over again. I think, honestly, it would be 1 to 2% of students that tell me, no, I do better in exams than I do in coursework. And this is what I want to help change. I want exams to become the thing that really give your team the opportunity to shine, that you as a student can say, you know what, this is one of my strengths, bring on the exam. Because this is something that I see so often, is that students do such hard work and then it comes to the exam and then it kind of is always the thing that is a lower percentage than many of the other things that they've done. This was definitely me as a student. And I will tell you, this was me in the first 4 years of my teaching. Now, I would still consider myself to be, and I will say this as objectively as I can, an excellent teacher. I got rated as outstanding by Ofsted. I won a national teaching award back in the UK. I spent my first 4 years teaching in the UK and doing it, let's say, successfully. I still had no idea about how exams worked. And I really had this like niggling feeling as I was going through those years of going, I really would love to kind of go behind that curtain and be on the inside of the exam boards and figure out how exactly, like, who decides what gets written in the questions, who decides what gets marks and what doesn't, and how many marks are going to be awarded for this. I just became really, really curious about that. Of course, because, you know, I would see students who were predicted A's and A stars and either sometimes wouldn't get them, or have students that maybe like would suddenly like pull something out of the bag and do something amazing in exams. So I wanted to understand what was going on so I could better help those students, and just for my own curiosity. So at the end of my 4th year of teaching, this is what I was still in the UK, I went and did external exam marking. Okay, and you have all of the training, and then you mark hundreds of scripts, script just being the word for a completed exam paper. And like, I've drawn one light bulb, there were like a million light bulbs that went off. I can still remember sitting in the training room, because this is where we had to do everything in person, traveling to and sitting in the training room, going through, and just sitting there, on the one hand, just going, oh my goodness, like I couldn't believe just how specific, like, oh, if the word says this, it's this, and if it's written this way, it's this. It was just such an eye-opener. And I also like remember simultaneously the feeling of just going, I really need to get back to school and start sharing this with students, because remember, I'm not giving away any of the answers. This isn't about telling people what's on the exam paper, because of course that was the exam that had already been done. And the beauty of this, folks, is that that's not what is needed to do well. What students need in order to do well and to feel confident is not to be given the answers or told what's on their paper, but be able to figure out what to do with whatever is written on that paper, whatever is in front of them in that moment, with an unseen question under exam conditions, with the pressure of being in the exam hall and the timed nature of an exam. And so that's basically what I did. And from then on, the whole rest of this is just me wanting to take on as many different opportunities to go and work with all different exam boards on all different types of exams, do all different types of marking and assessment, and then sharing as much as I can with students and with parents. And I will also say with teachers. I also do run professional development for teachers, because there's a tiny percentage of us that actually stick our hands up to do external exam marking. Most teachers are not like going, yes, please give me more marking to do. So this is why we're here. This is why I'm here. And really, because what I want as an outcome, and I'm hoping that you'll get some of these outcomes here just from this session this evening, is to find out like, how can I add just one more mark onto that, maybe getting from a 3 to a 4 out of 4 or a 5 on a question? How do I move up one level on those marking criteria, on the bands of marking criteria, on a more like a leveled response? And how do I do that whilst also living out those senior years, that exam period, those external exams, study life in general, in a much more stress-free, balanced, harmonious, and fun way? So that, yes, they are still putting in effort, but the effort is actually paying off. And what they're not doing is, I will say wasting, I don't really want to use that word too lightly, but wasting time on things that aren't actually the most effective ways to be doing things. Students who are spending hours and hours and hours on study because they want to put in the effort and they want to feel like they're doing as much as they can, but I want them to be doing that in ways that's actually going to pay off. This is the first takeaway from all of the external exam marking that I have done for this year. This is the first takeaway that I want to share with you. This is one of the big problems that I have seen for students in the responses that I have marked. Now, I will just say, because again, I will never share anything that I'm not allowed to. I can't be sharing any specific details of any of the marking I've just done until after all of the results are published, okay? But what I can tell you about is the concepts and the issues that I have seen in general, and then I'll be very specific about how we go about fixing them and sharing some specific examples that I am allowed to share with you, okay? So the first one is really this whole idea that students are relying so heavily on just their subject knowledge in order to try to get the marks. And what I mean by that is trying to, I can tell like they've learned and revised and memorized so much information, and they're just so determined that whatever that is, it is going on this page. And there's nothing wrong with that to some extent, except for the fact that that is not where they are losing marks. So if we consider this, this full 100% of what needs to be happening with those exam papers in the responses to their questions, the knowledge part is pretty well filled up. They have got a lot of knowledge down on this paper in their answers. That is not where they're losing marks. Where they're losing marks is because they are not applying that knowledge correctly. It's the application of that knowledge to the way that the question is asked and the demands of the marking criteria. Now, in many ways, I could actually put those together and I kind of say this is the definition of exam technique. Being able to identify and then respond to the demands of the question and do it in a way that the mark scheme requires and do it under timed conditions, which is the additional kind of stressor of an exam. And this is the issue. If we think that we can just rely on putting and learning all of this knowledge, but we don't understand how to relate to the actual command of the question and how to address and be able to essentially predict, because of course you don't get a rubric alongside the exam paper like you do for coursework, predict the mark scheme and understand what it's going to require based on the wording of the question and the marks available. If we can't do that and we can't then formulate a succinct yet sophisticated response, then we are missing out on marks. And we're bringing up a few other issues as well that I'm going to get to. So a lot of you will have heard me talk before about the study success formula, and this is absolutely, we can translate this to be an exam success formula. It's knowledge plus application. So many students, and I know this was me as a student, were just relying on knowledge. I was just thinking that if I just know the subject really well and probably do some extra, the whole wider reading, I will never advise a student to do wider reading. Because if it's not on the syllabus, it doesn't need to go into their answer. If they want to do wider reading because they just love the subject, absolutely, brilliant, all for it. I know education is supposed to instill the love of learning, and in some ways it does, and in some ways it doesn't. And when it comes to exams, doing wider reading is not the thing that is going to bring up confidence and performance. Application of that knowledge is what's going to do that. For 99.9% of students in my experience, having marked hundreds of papers, and over the past 15 years, this is way back, I did my first round of external exam marking in 2010, probably tens of thousands of papers. I can tell you this for sure. It's rarely because students are putting wrong answers, especially for the hardworking, committed students who really want to do well. I'm not saying there aren't some students who aren't getting some questions just wrong, but I know I'm talking to a certain type of audience here. This is the second, so really the solution to that, I should say, is obviously getting that application up. And this ties into this one, because as we just mentioned, when students are trying to rely on knowledge to be the thing that's just going to get them more and more marks, this is what happens. So this is the second problem. Students running out of time or feeling like they weren't able to write as much as they wanted to on their exam paper. Okay. Now, the root cause of this is not because of time. It's not because they've been, the questions were too big or too many. So I will say sometimes that can happen lower in the school when it's not such a rigorous process of designing an exam. It can happen. But Most of the time, it's because students are writing more than they need to. And that ties back to because they're trying to put as much knowledge down on paper. Again, I cannot tell you, I would have been like prime candidate of this. I was literally doing the whole, I'll write this just in case. Or I've learned it. It is going on this paper because I'm pretty sure this is impressive information. Please tell me this is not just me. I'm pretty sure it isn't from the papers that I read. This is where, this is like the ultimate of exam technique. This is the ultimate of exam technique. Most marks, least words. This is what we are all aiming for in the world of exam technique. How do I get maximum marks with the least amount of words? Now, I'm not saying we're trying to be like super smart here with our word choices, although, you know, we could be. But what I really mean is we're not putting in more information than we need to. We're not adding extra just in case. We're not, this is what I call spaghetti throwing, which is just like, I'm just going to write as much as I can about this sort of general topic that's being asked about. And I'm hoping that some of it sticks, and some of it will. Some of it may not. I'm going to show you an example in a second where it doesn't. And it's taking up time from other questions. I marked the big, long, extended response answer at the end of the paper that I was marking, and there were so many students that clearly did not get time to finish. The solution to this is figuring out what is the weakest link here. What's the thing that is holding your team back from achieving their most marks potential? Is it that, I mean, maybe it is that they don't know their subject content well enough, in which case that's the thing to go fix. But if they are at least a 7, I usually say like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in terms of feeling confident and competent in the subject content that they're learning, i.e. they get it in class, that's probably not their weakest link. I want to share with you what this really means, okay? So this is where we start to look at the solution. So the problem is we're running out of time. The real root cause is we're writing more than we need to. And even we could say within that, it's really because we're uncertain about what the question really requires and what that mark scheme demands. That's the real cause, is the uncertainty. We're not really sure what we're exactly supposed to be doing, so we take a lot of guesses and we hedge our bets a lot. So what I want to really reiterate here is that we don't just want to write about. So many times students laser in on the topic of the question. What is this asking me about? We actually want to consider, what is it asking me to do? So I always say to students, don't start writing about, don't tell me about, respond to the command of the question. Let me go a little bit further with this. This is a cognition model. It's called Bloom's taxonomy. It has been around for decades. There's a reason why something sticks. Now, there have been different variations done on this over the years, but this is essentially the foundation of all of the teaching and learning that is happening in schools. At the bottom, we've got the first level, which is knowledge. We've got understanding, we've got apply, we've got analyze, we've got evaluate, we've got create. I would say straight away, we're rarely, if ever, getting a create level question in an exam. It's just not the time to be creative. Even if, and this is going to be super useful and important, even if you have a question which is coming up with creative writing, having to write maybe a short story or a journal entry or something like that. Let me tell you why. It's technically more of an apply level, because what they're really doing is seeing, can you use and apply effectively, appropriately, language techniques, literary devices? That's what they want you to, that's what they want to see. Your vocabulary choices. The story is not that important. In fact, it's barely important at all. No one is waiting to see the next J.K. Rowling in the English exam. No offense to anyone. But when students put so much effort on trying to come up with a great story, it's not about being creative. Okay, it's about showing, can you use those techniques and devices? Can you demonstrate that? So much of this is about, what are we trying to demonstrate? What are we trying to prove? Here's what I want you to see. That question that I just shared with you was a describe level question. Describe is at the level of just stating knowledge, facts, information. It's at the lowest level. Makes sense that it was only 1 mark. because as we go up through the levels of cognition and levels of difficulty, that's when we tend to get the higher mark questions. So I really like that this is shown this way as well. I think this is why this model just works, is because as we go up, this is the higher mark question. We get analyze and evaluate level questions that are the big extended responses. Okay, we didn't need to be explaining. Explain is an understand level command. And I will say now there are many, 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 many different commands at each of these levels. So this is one of the things that I love to work with students on, is figuring out which of the commands go with which levels. A lot of exam boards will call these all different things. I call them command words to try and give an umbrella description. They are sometimes called task verbs, directives, cognitive verbs, cognitions. Often students will be told about them. They'll have a poster up with them. They may even be given a little bit of guidance on identifying them, but rarely do students truly know what to do with them, what they require of them, and what they then need to demonstrate to operate at that level. Okay, this is why I always like to say all of the skills and strategies and techniques that I share are universal. It doesn't matter what exam board you're with, it doesn't matter what type of exam you're sitting, it doesn't matter what subject it's in. These are skills and strategies and techniques. They are not syllabus specific, topic and knowledge based, like subject based knowledge, I should say. Okay, the sort of other end of the scale, which is instead of like writing more than we need to, we have the opposite problem, which is not giving enough. And often this is written as add more detail, say more, go further with this. That's the kind of comments that we see on the marking. And they're perfectly valid and they're not wrong. But again, do students know how? Where am I supposed to be adding more detail? How do I add more detail without just saying the same thing in a different way? And I'll tell you now, that is not the way to do it. This is what we call waffle, which is, just saying the same thing in different ways over and over, or rambling, or just repetition. You cannot get the same marks twice. If you've got a tick and you've ticked a box, doesn't matter if you do it again better, you're still getting that same mark. There are not multiple marks. Like it's like, oh, but they've done it again, they've done it really well, we'll give them an extra mark. You cannot get the same marks twice. Okay. So this is problem number 4, not responding in enough detail. Now, I will tell you now, this is not about writing more information. And this is what most students think, like, okay, well, I'll write more information. Remember, more information is just knowledge and maybe understanding level. If we are having an analyze level question, a discursive piece, an evaluate level command, it does not want us to give more information, okay? The root cause is not knowing how to respond to a particular command, but in a way that hits those higher level criteria. Like I said, students need to understand the how. How do I actually add more detail? Where and why should I be adding more detail in this particular place? To what? In what way? Okay. Now, I shared this particular little clip of a mark scheme in an email that I sent out to you folks a couple of days ago. I liked this because I've been glancing through. I always, like, as you know, I'm just addicted to all of this stuff. And I realized that the New South Wales, the HSC exams had been released already. Like, this is super early. They don't normally get released this quickly. So all the past papers for 2025 are already released by the NISA exam board. So of course, me being me, I'm scrolling through. And this one just was a really lovely example of students who would have struggled. I didn't mark this paper, but students will have struggled sometimes to reach those higher level marks, because look at the descriptors. I had a conversation with a parent student about this just a few hours ago, earlier on a consult. Demonstrates a sound understanding, provides a thorough comparison, provides an extensive comparison. What is the difference? I know that we can see the difference in the wording, but on a very tactical, tangible is probably a better word, way, what does that look like in a student's piece of writing? What makes us decide that that is extensive versus that is thorough? This is why we do hours and hours and hours of examiner training every single year on each different question and each different element of the marking guide. Okay, because this is only 1 out of the 3 bullet points per item anyhow. This is what I want you to see. First of all, notice it goes from understanding to comparison. Those are 2 different levels. Understanding. Comparison, I put this on purpose, the compare command is an analyze level command. This is 2 levels up. So if a student responds with some sort of explanation rather than a comparison, they are stuck at that lower level on the marking guide. They just can't go up from there. So what do we have to do? What do we have to do to go from an understanding to compare, and then from thorough up to extensive? Well, first of all, compare is very specific in what it requires. It requires both similarities and differences. Firstly, what I know a lot of students will have done, because I've marked questions like this before, they will have focused on the differences. They will only talk about the differences. They won't necessarily look for and mention the things that are actually similar. They'll highlight the differences because they're like, well, I've got two different things here. I need to talk about the differences. If they know what every command requires, they know what to include in the response, and they know what not to include, okay? Because so many students will, get, I want to see an A grade answer. Do they know why it is an A grade response? This how and this why, I know I keep saying them, but it's because it's for a good reason, okay? The trap that a lot of students fall into when it is a compare command is they start telling me information about A and then they tell me information about B. And remember where just standard information is? It is the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. And they will get stuck. They will give me loads of great info, but it's describing, or I was going to say descriptive information. They've told me about A and they've told me about B. They have not actually compared them. And I know this sounds crazy, but as I will always say, in some ways this is good news, and in some ways this is bad news. Some people go, oh my goodness, really? So if I stick an ER on the end, that now counts? I'm like, yeah. Now you can you imagine now me sitting in that exam marker room, the training room, like 15 years ago, going, wow, okay. Why, the alternative is we go, this is great news. I don't need to learn anything differently. I just need to know how to do a comparative response. Because if I just said, these have a lot, and then in a separate sentence, these don't have many, those are two descriptions until I have used comparative language. I could say more than, less than, whereas, however, similarly, same as, different, both, have, this one doesn't. Whatever it is, I need to make sure that it is comparative language. Okay, what if they only outline the features? If they only tell me about A and tell me about B and they don't use that comparative language, maximum 3 out of 6. If you're a teen or if you're a student and you've ever ended up with perfectly great information and you're like, how is this only a 3 out of 6? This could be, as an example, the type of reason why, okay? The solution is being trained in and understanding how to respond to different levels of commands. I really feel that students need this explicitly taught. I don't think this is something we can just naturally pick up. Even the wording, the descriptors that go along with all these cognitive verbs and task verbs and directives, they're not always that easy to figure out, honestly, from the exam boards. The QCAA just released an updated one, and I was excited to see what it was. And in my opinion, it looks more complicated than the first one. But then they're not really made for students. They're made for the educators. Which kind of brings us into, quite nicely, or not so nicely, problem number 5, which is quite an overarching one, but missing out on easy marks. I bet if the student had told me the lots of things about A and the lots of things about B, they probably could have used comparative language. They would have been easy marks. They're marks that they absolutely had the knowledge to be able to get. They just didn't apply that knowledge in the appropriate way that met the command and the demand of the mark scheme. The root cause of this is that we're just not addressing the criteria on the mark scheme. We just don't realize what some of the stuff is that is demanded that we could work out if we had the knowledge of how to dissect the question and relate that to the requirements. I can tell you now, we're not changing the exam system anytime soon, okay? So we may as well figure out how to work with it. I just think that understanding this kind of stuff, of understanding that if it gives you a data table, if it gives you a source, if it gives you a stimulus, if it gives you a case study, a scenario, you are expected to reference it no matter what. And I just think this is such an easy thing to pick up to get in those extra marks, because really the solution here is to understand how these mark schemes actually work. The fact that you have been given a data table, like I said, could be any source, any stimulus. The fact that you've been given something to work from, you are expected to explicitly and directly reference it, even if it does not tell you in the question. That is my whistle-stop tour of my 5 top takeaways in terms of the skill sets, the techniques that I can see students are lacking, that I was just sat at my desk going, oh, if this student had just literally, like, if they'd have put an ER, if they put a data reference, whatever it was, I could just see students losing easy marks. So I really, really wanted to share a lot of these with you, as many as I could, in a way that is very digestible and understandable. That is my 5 top takeaways from marking over 400 pages of external exam answers, including what to do, what not to do, but very importantly, with the how and the why.
So I hope you found maybe some of those things familiar and things that you were already aware of and were just a really helpful reminder. And I hope that there were also a couple of things that are new or you hadn't really heard about before that you can really use to optimize your team's performance and how you support them and guide them. I would love to get your feedback. I would love to hear what was a particular element that really maybe resonated with you or really stood out to you, or that you think would be the most helpful thing that your team could do and take on board. Email me, support@rocksolidstudy.com. I promise to reply to you personally. And if you want to share a little bit more information about where your team is at with their studies, then I will be more than happy to also point you in the direction of being able to help overcome maybe some of their challenges and achieve some of their goals if you want to share a little bit about that. I still have another couple of podcast episodes up my sleeve, content and information that I really want to share with you before we wrap up over these summer holidays. So I won't wish you a Merry Christmas just yet, but I'll meet you back here again soon for the next episode. Take care. Bye. If you're ready to have your team achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.